There are moments in life when everything feels heavy, unclear, and unbearably confusing. You wake up and something inside you whispers that you're off track, that somehow you've drifted away from who you were supposed to become. And it's frightening because you don't even know how it happened. You just know that the path you're on no longer feels like yours. Feeling lost is not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that an older version of you is no longer capable of carrying the weight of the future you're meant to build. When the world feels out of control, when nothing seems stable, that is precisely the moment you're being called to reorganize your life from the inside out. Being lost is painful, yes, but it's also meaningful. It's a signal that the structure of your life needs rebuilding, and you can rebuild it, piece by piece, day by day, by taking responsibility for even one tiny corner of your existence. Maybe it's your room, your schedule, your mindset, or your habits. Order one thing, commit to one action, straighten out one small part of your world. Because when you do that, you send a powerful message to yourself that you are not finished yet, that you still have control, that you still have the capacity to shape the direction of your life. The truth is, your potential is hidden behind the very things you're avoiding. The uncomfortable conversations, the difficult choices, the skills you've been afraid to learn. All of these are doors to a future that only opens when you step toward them. You don't need to see the entire road. You just need enough courage to take the next step. And that step, no matter how small, begins to pull you out of the darkness. The future starts to respond the moment you do. If you feel lost, it simply means your story isn't over. In fact, it might be just beginning, and you have far more strength, far more intelligence, and far more resilience than the fear inside you wants you to believe. Stand up, face the uncertainty, and move forward. Even an inch of progress is enough to change everything. The experience of feeling lost is not a failure, but a signal for transformation, and understanding this truth can change the way you interpret some of the hardest moments of your life. When people say they feel lost, what they usually mean is that the map they were following no longer makes sense. The plan, the hopes, the expectations. Somehow they don't fit reality anymore. And the first instinct is almost always to panic, to assume something has gone terribly wrong, or worse, that they themselves have gone wrong. But being lost is not a defect of character. It is not proof that you're incapable or weak or behind everyone else. It is proof that something inside you has outgrown your old structure, and the world is nudging you toward a new one. There comes a time in every life when the path ahead blurs. You may not even notice the shift at first. It begins quietly, maybe as a sense of restlessness or an uneasiness you can't explain. Something feels off, but you keep moving because you assume it's just stress or a temporary phase. Then one day, the feeling becomes too loud to ignore. You look around and realize you don't know where you're going anymore. The goals you used to cling to don't motivate you. The systems you built no longer support you. The identity you worked so hard to maintain feels outdated, like wearing clothes that no longer fit. That's the moment people tend to interpret as failure. But in reality, it's a psychological alarm telling you that the next version of your life requires a new version of you. Feeling lost forces you to confront truths you've postponed. It pushes you into a kind of internal wilderness where the familiar dissolves, leaving you alone with your thoughts, your fears, and your deeper desires. And although this feels overwhelming, it's in this very wilderness that transformation begins. Human beings rarely change when everything is comfortable. We grow when the old ways stop working. We evolve when our current understanding of the world becomes too small for who we're becoming. Being lost is the discomfort that shakes you awake. It pulls apart the pieces of your life so you can rebuild them with more honesty and more alignment. There is a subtle but powerful shift that happens when you stop viewing lostness as a verdict and start viewing it as information. Instead of thinking, I don't know what I'm doing, so I must be failing, you begin to think, I don't know what I'm doing because I'm in the middle of becoming someone new. This reframing doesn't immediately remove the confusion or uncertainty, but it gives meaning to them. And meaning is what humans need to endure chaos. If you can see the value in your disorientation, you can walk through it without collapsing under the weight of it. Feeling lost also reveals the parts of your life that were built on autopilot. Many people choose careers, relationships, habits, and routines not because they reflect who they truly are, but because they were convenient, socially approved, or simply what they thought they should do. But eventually, the gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be grows too big, and something inside you refuses to continue. That inner refusal shows up as confusion. Your mind becomes foggy because it's trying to warn you that the direction you've been following is not yours. So the feeling of being lost is not an error. It is a correction. In these moments, anxiety often rushes in. You start comparing your journey to others. You wonder why they seem so certain, so stable, so clear. But what you don't see is that everyone, at some point, goes through periods of internal collapse and reconstruction. Some people are just better at hiding it. Others distract themselves so intensely they never give their lostness the space to speak. But those who allow themselves to feel it honestly, without running, discover something essential. Clarity is born from confusion. Identity is forged through uncertainty. Confidence grows only after you make choices in the dark. Transformation requires a kind of psychological death. The version of you that existed before cannot survive the life you're trying to step into, so it falls apart. Your old motivations fade. Your old habits feel empty. Your old dreams stop inspiring you. And although this collapse can feel terrifying, it's necessary. You are not meant to stay the same. The purpose of life is not to maintain a fixed identity, but to continuously refine yourself as you encounter new experiences, new information, and new inner realities. Feeling lost is the moment your mind realizes it's time to evolve, but hasn't yet learned how. People often ask how to get rid of the feeling of being lost, but the real question should be, what is this feeling trying to show me? Lostness is not something to eliminate, it's something to listen to. It's your intuition pointing out that you've been living according to rules or expectations that no longer resonate. It's a signal that asks you to look inward, to examine what you truly want rather than what you've been taught to want. And when you listen, even quietly, the fog starts to thin. You may not see the entire path, but a tiny direction begins to glow. This glow often appears in small ways: a new interest, a sudden curiosity, a quiet urge to change something in your routine, a feeling of relief when you imagine letting go of something you've been clinging to. These are not random emotions. They are the breadcrumbs leading you out of the darkness. Transformation rarely arrives through grand epiphanies. It arrives through subtle shifts, through noticing what energizes you and what drains you, through admitting what is no longer working and having the humility to start again. Being lost also teaches resilience. When the world no longer gives you clear answers, you are forced to create your own. You begin to build direction from scratch. You experiment, you fail, you try again, and in this process, you develop a strength that people who always felt certain never learn. Because clarity that is gifted to you is fragile, it can collapse the moment life changes, but clarity you build with your own hands, piece by piece, is unshakable. It becomes part of your character. Feeling lost is not a failure. It is a profound invitation to rebuild your life with deeper honesty and greater purpose. It is the birthplace of growth, the doorway to your next chapter, and the signal that a more authentic version of you is ready to emerge. Chaos often appears when old habits no longer serve you, and recognizing this truth can change the way you understand the most confusing periods of your life. People usually think chaos enters their world because something external has gone wrong. Someone disappointed them, an opportunity closed, a relationship shifted, or circumstances suddenly became hostile. But chaos, in its deepest psychological sense, frequently rises from within. It emerges when the routines, beliefs, and behaviors you've relied on for years start losing their ability to hold your life together. It's like the inner structure that once kept everything stable begins to crack, and instead of feeling supported, you feel exposed. That exposure is uncomfortable, but it's also necessary. because it reveals that the old version of your life has reached its limits. There are habits you've carried for so long that you don't even question them anymore. Daily patterns, ways of thinking, coping mechanisms, and reactions that used to make sense at one point in your life slowly become outdated as you grow. But because they're familiar, you hold on to them for far longer than they actually serve you. People cling to routines not because they're useful, but because they're predictable. The mind prefers the comfort of the known, even if the known is slowly eroding their potential. And when life pushes you into situations that your old habits aren't equipped to handle, chaos shows up not as punishment, but as feedback. Chaos says, "This isn't working anymore." It might be the way you avoid important conversations, the way you procrastinate when life demands action, the way you seek validation instead of building real confidence, the way you distract yourself instead of confronting what needs to change. All of these habits might have helped you survive an earlier phase of life. Maybe they protected you when you didn't feel strong enough to face certain responsibilities. Maybe they numbed pain you didn't know how to process. But survival strategies are not meant to become permanent architecture. There comes a moment when the very habits that once kept you safe begin to restrict your growth. And when that moment arrives, the world starts to feel overwhelming, unstable, and unbearably chaotic. People underestimate how deeply their internal state shapes their external perception. When your inner habits are no longer aligned with the life you're trying to build, everything around you begins to feel like it's falling apart. You may interpret this as life attacking you, as fate being unfair, as the universe blocking your path. But if you look more honestly, you'll often see that the chaos is a reflection of your resistance to change. You're trying to evolve while staying the same. You're asking for a better life while repeating behaviors that are incompatible with that life. You're hoping for clarity while clinging to patterns that create confusion. The tension between who you are and who you're becoming manifests as chaos. Chaos is not the enemy. It is the pressure that breaks the shell you've outgrown. It is the disruption that forces you to confront the gap between your potential and your current behavior. Without this pressure, you would stay in comfortable stagnation. You would continue repeating the same cycles simply because they are familiar. But chaos disrupts familiarity. It shakes you out of autopilot and forces you to face realities you've been avoiding. It's the psychological equivalent of a storm clearing a landscape. It destroys what is fragile or outdated so that something stronger can take its place. The uncomfortable truth is that people often wish for transformation without wanting disruption. They want growth without discomfort, change without uncertainty, evolution without chaos. But that's not how human psychology works. If your old habits were strong enough to support the life you dream of, you wouldn't be dreaming, you'd already be living it. So when chaos arises, it's not a sign that you're doomed. It's a sign that you're being pushed toward a new level of existence that your old patterns simply cannot sustain. Chaos often emerges at transitional moments. You may find yourself losing interest in things that once brought comfort, or feeling restless in situations you used to tolerate. Conversations feel different. Relationships stretch, goals shift, your motivation fluctuates. These aren't signs of failure. They're signs that your inner map is being redrawn. And while this feels unstable, it's also a sign of psychological expansion. You're being invited to grow into someone more capable, more aware, and more aligned with your deeper values. One of the hardest parts of this process is accepting that not everything that collapses is meant to be restored. Sometimes chaos destroys things because they were never truly supporting you. A habit that seemed harmless becomes a barrier. A relationship that felt safe reveals itself as limiting. A routine that once grounded you becomes a trap. And when these things fall apart, your instinct might be to try to put them back exactly as they were. But chaos doesn't arrive to help you rebuild the old structure. It arrives to help you build a new one. Think of it like renovating a house. You can't build a stronger foundation without breaking the weak one first. You can't install new windows without removing the old ones. You can't expand a room without tearing down part of a wall. Chaos is the demolition phase of personal growth. It strips away what no longer fits so you can create space for something better. But when you're standing in the middle of the mess, it's hard to trust that something meaningful will emerge from it. There are moments when chaos feels endless. You wake up exhausted, unsure, overwhelmed by decisions you don't feel ready to make. It feels like life is demanding too much from you all at once. But often, what it's really demanding is that you stop relying on habits that no longer work. It's urging you to develop new skills, healthier boundaries, clearer thinking, deeper self-awareness. And until you take that step, the chaos persists, not to punish you, but to guide you. Human beings are incredibly adaptable, but adaptation requires willingness. You can't cling to the old and expect to step into the new. The moment you begin changing your habits, however small the shift, the chaos starts to reorganize itself. Maybe you wake up earlier. Maybe you start taking responsibility for tasks you've been avoiding. Maybe you finally speak honestly with someone you've been tiptoeing around. Maybe you choose discipline over distraction for even 1 hour. These small changes signal to your mind that you are ready for a new structure, and slowly, the chaos responds. It begins to settle, not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger. Chaos reveals what is outdated. It forces you to grow. It invites you to build habits that match the life you're trying to create. And while that process is messy and unsettling, it is also the birthplace of your transformation. Taking responsibility for even one small thing can restart your direction, and this idea, though it sounds simple, holds a kind of quiet, transformative power that most people underestimate. When you feel lost, unmotivated, or overwhelmed, your instinct is often to search for a big solution, some dramatic breakthrough that will instantly put your life back on track. People imagine that clarity comes like a lightning strike, or that motivation suddenly pours in from somewhere outside. But real change rarely works like that. It begins with something much smaller, something almost unnoticeable, something that seems too trivial to matter. And yet, it is precisely these small acts of responsibility that start reshaping the entire trajectory of your life. Human beings often collapse under the weight of their own expectations. They think they need to change everything at once: their habits, their goals, their relationships, their mindset, their identity. And standing in front of a mountain that enormous, they freeze. They do nothing because the task feels impossible. They tell themselves they'll begin when they feel ready, or when life becomes less complicated, or when they find more energy. But readiness is not something you wait for. It's something you create, and the act of taking responsibility for even one small thing is the first step in creating it. Responsibility is the antidote to chaos. When your life feels scattered, messy, or directionless, it's usually because you've lost your grip on the structure that keeps your world in order. You may feel like you're drifting, like your days don't add up to anything meaningful, like you're watching your own life unfold from a distance. That emotional distance is a sign that you've disconnected from your own agency, the belief that your actions matter, and the fastest way to rebuild that connection is to choose one small, manageable task and commit to it fully. It could be as simple as cleaning your room. People often laugh when they hear this because it sounds too basic to make any real difference. But the impact lies not in the act itself, but in what the act represents. When you clean your room, you're not just organizing objects, you're reorganizing yourself. You're reminding your mind that you are capable of creating order, even if the rest of your world feels uncontrollable. The room becomes a physical reflection of the effort you put into restoring clarity. And the moment you make one area of your life orderly, you subtly begin to believe that you can bring order to other areas as well. Taking responsibility is powerful because it places you back in the driver's seat. When people feel lost, they often fall into a mindset of helplessness. They start believing that life is happening to them rather than being shaped by them. They wait for someone to save them or for circumstances to magically improve. But waiting is a form of surrender. The longer you wait, the stronger your feeling of powerlessness becomes. Responsibility breaks that pattern. It shifts your mental posture from passive to active, from victim to participant. Even small responsibility has the ability to awaken your dormant strength. Another reason small responsibility matters is because it bypasses the resistance that usually blocks change. If you tell yourself you need to transform your entire life in one sweep, your mind rebels. It senses danger, it fears failure, it anticipates disappointment, and so it shuts down. But if you tell yourself you're just going to fix one thing, your desk, your routine, your sleep schedule, your posture, your spending habits, your morning ritual, the mind doesn't have enough reason to resist. It allows the change to happen because the task feels safe, manageable, and achievable, and once you complete the task, something subtle shifts inside you. You feel a small spark of confidence. You feel a sense of progress, even if it's tiny. You feel a little more anchored, a little more stable. These micro feelings matter because motivation is not built through inspiration. It's built through evidence. Evidence that you can act. Evidence that your actions produce results. Evidence that you are capable of influencing your circumstances. Responsibility provides that evidence one small step at a time. When you commit to one small responsibility, you begin rebuilding the trust you have in yourself. Many people don't realize how much self-trust they've lost over the years. Broken promises you made to yourself, goals you postponed, habits you abandoned, decisions you avoided. All of these create internal fractures. Each fracture makes it harder to believe that you will follow through on your intentions. Taking responsibility for something small allows you to repair those fractures gradually. It's like telling yourself, look, I said I would do this, and I did. Over time, that kind of self-proof becomes powerful. Another overlooked part of responsibility is the emotional clarity it brings. When you're overwhelmed, your inner world is noisy, thoughts collide, fears amplify, everything feels tangled. But when you take responsibility for something small and complete it, you create a moment of silence in that noise. You feel grounded. Your thoughts slow down. The fog lifts just enough for you to see a tiny glimpse of what to do next. This is how direction begins to form, not through grand visions, but through a sequence of small, grounded choices that slowly pull you out of confusion. Responsibility also has a way of revealing what you truly care about. When you start taking control of small parts of your life, you become more sensitive to what feels meaningful and what feels empty. You start noticing patterns, what drains you, what energizes you, what aligns with your values, and what contradicts them. This awareness doesn't arrive through thinking alone, it arrives through doing. Action sharpens perception. Without action, your thoughts spin in circles. With action, even small action, your mind begins to organize itself around what matters. Sometimes the smallest responsibility leads to the largest changes. You decide to wake up an hour earlier, and suddenly your entire day feels different. You commit to reading 10 pages a day, and within months your thinking transforms. You choose to exercise for just 15 minutes, and before long your energy, discipline, and confidence strengthen. You commit to speaking honestly in one conversation, and it opens the door to a new level of authenticity in your relationships. The scale of the action is irrelevant. What matters is the direction it sets in motion. The truth is, you don't need to fix your whole life to regain your sense of purpose. You just need to fix one thing you can control right now. One thing you can take ownership of without waiting for permission, without needing perfect conditions, without needing to be in the right mood. When you take responsibility for one thing today, tomorrow you'll feel capable of taking responsibility for two. And eventually, without realizing it, you'll look back and see that the direction you thought was lost has been slowly rebuilding itself, one small choice at a time.